Today I am in Yellowstone National Park and I am going to see just how many wildlife species I can photograph with only 24 hours to photograph this massive 2.2 million acre park. Let's get started. Hour 1, sleep. Actually, the first 4 hours were sleep, all the way up until I got going well before sunrise, headed to a spot where I hoped I might be able to find my favorite species in all of Yellowstone, the grizzly bear. So this spot where I'm watching these bears right now is actually outside of Yellowstone, but these are park bears that are coming down out of the park into this valley to feed on caraway root. And this is something that they do every year this time of year, and it's something that can be really fun to watch because you get a lot of bears out in this valley and obviously can provide some really cool opportunities for photos. There were two bears just in front of me, and neither paid me any attention as I filmed the scene. They were too busy feeding. Eventually, the sun peeked over the distant ridge. Daylight had officially begun. And just as it did so, both bears ambled out of the meadow and into the trees. Here, they would bed down for the day, while it was hot out. Then, in the evening, when it cooled off again, they would return to the meadows to feed. I had two primary goals today. One, to photograph and film as many different species as possible. And two, get at least one epic wildlife photo. This was going to be difficult to do with such limited time, but it was definitely still doable if things aligned in my favor. I drove further up the valley, continuing in my search for bears. Unfortunately, there were none to be seen, but I did find our second species for the day, white-tailed deer. So I drove up the road a little further after those bears disappeared and found some white-tailed deer down here along this stream. Was really hoping for more bears, but unfortunately it's not really Actually, hold on just a second. They were pretty far out, but a grizzly sow with 2 cubs of the year. They, like the other bears, were feeding on caraway root. Suddenly, Mom popped up, looking around. Something had spooked her. She called her cubs over to her side. Could it be another bear? Nope, just a truck and trailer starting another day's work on the ranch. Very quickly, they went back to feeding. I gave the sow and her cubs one last look, and then began the drive out of the valley and back towards Yellowstone Park itself. However, as I was cruising along, something darted out in front of my car. A long-tailed weasel. Only the 5th I've ever seen in all my time in Yellowstone. He quickly disappeared into the brush as I jumped out with my camera. Hoping I still might get a photo of him, I walked up the road to where he had went in, and he popped back out, darting across the road again. I followed once again, peering into the brush in hopes of spotting him, but this time he was gone for good. Finally, I continued on to town, where I got some breakfast and then drove up into Yellowstone. On the way in, I spotted another new species for the day, elk. The light was pretty bad for photos though, so given the limited time I had to make this video, I decided to continue deeper into the park to look for better opportunities. It only took me a few minutes drive up into the park to find our next species. I jumped out with my camera and, despite how far away it was, managed to get a decent clip of this coyote trotting through an open meadow. It was only 10 a.m. now, and the day had already been great. As I made my way further into the park and towards the Lamar Valley, I was confident we were going to succeed today. That was until I found myself on the side of the road with a flat. What wonderful timing. I lost a precious hour or so of daylight, but I managed to get the spare on with the help of a subscriber who was out in the park as well. If you're watching this, thank you. I appreciate the help. Well, that was quite the delay. Definitely not ideal for a time-sensitive shoot like this. It's noon now, it's midday, so we're halfway through the day, but that's okay. You know, we still have a lot of daylight left, and we had a great start this morning, so I'm confident that, you know, we can make it up with the time that we have left. So I'm headed east now, and hopefully we're not gonna have any more vehicle troubles and can make the most of what's left of the day. My next stop was a spot where I sometimes saw the small creatures known as pika. I knew that with it being as hot as it was out, the odds of seeing one were low, but I sat in the grass and waited regardless, listening for their shrill calls to give away their location. I waited for 10 or 15 minutes. Wasting too much time here was not a good idea. My time was far too limited for that. So, after seeing or hearing no sign of them, I began to walk back to the truck. But then, at the last minute, I quickly set up my gear and located the pika in the talus. There he was, resting on a rock and calling out every 30 seconds or so. I climbed up into the talus with my camera, following the pika. As I got closer to him, he suddenly became quite curious of me, turning towards me and posing on a rock. He gave me a moment to capture some really nice photos of him. However, as quickly as the encounter had begun, it ended, as he disappeared into the talus and was once again nowhere to be seen. An afternoon thunderstorm was rolling in overhead, which was a welcome sight for me. Storms mean cooler temperatures, perfect for a hot, sunny August day in which I'm trying to see as much wildlife as possible. So, with promising weather ahead, I packed up and got back on the road. Before finally going into Lamar Valley, I decided to take a quick hike to look for wildlife. I did see this Uinta ground squirrel and a mule deer, which did a really cool log jump for me. But otherwise, the hike yielded nothing but fantastic views and a rainy walk back to the truck. Alright, so we are at hour 17, it's 5 p.m., and we've only got about 3 to 4 hours of daylight left. The pika shoot was awesome, the hike, we got a few new species for the day, but otherwise it was kind of unproductive. Still fun though. But the thunderstorm has finally rolled in overhead, and temps have really cooled off with this cold front moving in, which means wildlife is going to be more active and gives us better odds for the next few hours of light that we have left of capturing some stuff. So I'm headed into Lamar Valley now, and fingers crossed we're going to have an epic finale out photographing wildlife to end out this video. Bison greeted me as I entered the Lamar Valley, currently in the peak of their rut, or mating season. As I got out towards the east gate of the park, I found a new species for the day on a faraway cliff. The invasive, but really cool nonetheless, mountain goat. And yeah, you heard me right, these goats are invasive to Yellowstone. They were introduced to the area for recreational hunting back in the 1940s and have been around the park or in it ever since. As much as I don't like invasive species, I've got to admit these guys are fun to watch. Even this far away, it is incredibly impressive to see how they make a living on a sheer rock wall, clinging to the cliffs with ease and finding food in a seemingly barren and unforgivingly steep habitat. As I continued down the road, I got a brief look at a mule deer disappearing into the forest and a red fox along the roadside. When I jumped out with my camera and began to film the fox, I was excited. These animals are one of my favorites in the park. However, once I got a closer look at the scene, my excitement quickly faded away. The fox wasn't just trotting the road for ease of travel, like I had originally thought. It was being fed. I didn't get it on camera, but the people in this camper had just thrown a handful of food out to the fox before driving away. Do not ever, under any circumstances, feed wildlife in Yellowstone. An animal that views humans as a food source immediately becomes a danger to the public, and in most cases, the Park Service has to euthanize it. What a shame. This really sucked to watch, so it wasn't that difficult for a chattering squirrel in a nearby tree to pull my lens away. I fired off a few shots of it, first on the side of a tree and then on a mossy log. And believe it or not, I think this photo is it. This is the epic photo for today. It may just be a squirrel, but between the pose and the log it was on, the shot came out beautifully. I actually like this shot so much that if I wasn't already a judge in the 2024 Wilder Photography Competition, I would enter this shot in it. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about here, the Wilder Photo Competition is an event hosted by a friend of mine, Jeremy Knipe, who some of you might remember I've done some collaboration YouTube videos with in the past. Jeremy's photo competition is unique in that it is judged live on YouTube every single year by a panel of wildlife photography YouTubers. We will critique the photos and select winners in real time, allowing for an interactive and dynamic experience for contest participants. There are 5 categories you can enter photos into, making each photographer more likely to win a prize. And speaking of prizes, the prize pool is pretty amazing for this competition. Over $5,000 in prizes are given away. The grand prize winner alone gets a $1,000 cash prize, with each category winner besides new photographers taking home $500. At the top of this video's description, you'll find a link to the Wilder Photography Competition website, where you can submit your photos now. The entry period ends September 22nd at midnight, with the live judging event taking place on October 5th. You get to see my work all the time. Now I want to get to see yours. But before I judge your photos, I almost forgot my 24 hours are still ticking away. Let's get back on the road. I drove out of the forest and back into the sagebrush flats of Lamar Valley, where with the last light of day, I found a few bison to photograph. Like I said earlier, the bison rut was in full swing, with the big bulls, or males, competing for mating rights with the cows, or females. The lip curl you're seeing here is what's called the Flehmen response. It's a way of gathering pheromones to tell if a female is ready to mate. Males will do this constantly during the rut, and they will break away from the rest of the herd with females that they want to mate. These are super sweet video clips. If they can keep her away from the herd, they can keep her out of reach of other interested males until she's ready. Finally, the warm glow of the sun dropped below the horizon in the distance as the moon rose up over the bison-covered landscape. Just before it got too dark to shoot, I got a glimpse of our final species for the day, pronghorn. This usually very common species in Yellowstone had eluded me all day, but finally it joined the list of all the different species I had gotten to see and photograph today. I'd say that's a pretty solid list for a day in the park, especially given that I lost a portion of it to a flat tire. And this doesn't even include the species that I saw, but wasn't able to get on camera. And let's not forget the photos I got either, including a portfolio-worthy squirrel and some of Yellowstone's biggest and smallest fauna. I'd call that a successful 24 hours, and I thank you all for joining me on it. I can't wait to see you all again in the next one, which is my biggest, most expensive, and best video yet. Oh Alaska, how I loved you. But that's for next video. Until then, it's been a very long day in Yellowstone. And so after driving home, I spent the last few hours of the day doing exactly what I did to start it. Sleep.